Sandra Pike from Roller Page Atlantic and the Pike Group. Well, don't we have another hot topic? It seems that March and April, if it's not the deed transfer tax or the extra 2% on property tax for owners who don't live here, and now it's the new Liberal platform talking about banning the way we are doing real estate here locally. So I thought to reach out to some of my colleagues in coaching who actually have like an auction open bidding and just get some information. But before we do that, I'll get everybody to introduce themselves, let them know where you're from. And Joe, we will start with you.
So g'day everybody, my name's Jo Mooney. I'm all the way down under in Melbourne, Australia. So we have a very probably topical conversation to have with what you've just said. Very
Absolutely.
interesting.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
And Chandler, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Chandler Halliburton here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada.
And Adam.
I'm Adam Henker with Sutton Group here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm at home, so I may have fur balls periodically passing through.
That's okay. So Joe, this is really extremely foreign to us here, having, bidding to be so transparent. So how does it work in Melbourne? Like, what is it that you guys do? And did you do what we did before?
So we actually do both. So it really does depend primarily on the geography. So in the CBD of Melbourne and Sydney in New South Wales as well, very, very, very strong auction. So full transparency, full on the street, face-to-face auctions. COVID obviously brought in no auctions. So we couldn't get on the streets and have public auctions. So that then created the online auction market. And now there is a hybrid of both. So in the more suburban areas, so the mum and dad areas, the first home buyer, growth belts, those sort of things, we are still very much a private treaty marketplace. But like your market, I'm hearing as well, going absolutely bananas and multiple offers on pretty much everything. So that then brought in essentially a multi-offer situation is an auction, because you're competing really strongly for one property with multiple buyers. So you do get into a bidding war. So whether it's a private treaty or whether it is actually a formal auction campaign, the outcome's pretty much the same, competition. So we've ended up with a lot of hybrid online systems. So I myself, I'm not in a street auction market per se. I'm in the first home buyer market, growth market, and we conduct every single sale of ours through an online offer platform. So we have the option of whether we are transparent with those offers or whether we go blind. So we have a lot of flexibility with how we actually transact property in Australia.
And guys, you can jump in because I know we're all intrigued with this. And Chandler, there you go.
Absolutely. So in your open bidding processes, are things like conditions, deposit, all the other features, those are all public knowledge as well, or is it just the price?
Currently everything. So we can choose, we have the option of whether we allow other buyers to see what the other you call them contingencies, I think, what the conditions are of everybody's offer, or we cannot. So it really depends on how open the agent actually prefers to be with all the buyers and how level that playing field is. Myself, I start all of my sales open. So everyone, all the buyers can see where they're at, what the playing field looks like. So one of the things that we've found, and I'm confident, I'm confident this is a global thing where the markets are going hot, is that the buyers want transparency and they want respect. And they're finding they're not getting a great deal of either in a lot of situations. So the more open and transparent we've been able to be with them at the beginning, they've then understood that we still work for our seller, and that we then will, if it gets a little bit long-winded, gets drawn out a little bit too much, that we will turn it off and that they can't see, and then we go blind and we call for what we say best and final at that point. So the difference between an auction and the open bidding or the online bidding sort of platforms is that the owner still has the choice of which offer they accept. So on a face-to-face actual auction, they have to take the highest because everyone's operating on the same terms and conditions, and it's just money that wins. Whereas on the open platforms, they can choose basically from a menu of options available. So instead of the agent turning up with a spreadsheet and saying, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's your 25 options, what would you like? These are just all presented to them in a digital platform.
Just a question, when you're saying these auctions are actually held in person outside of a house, yelling numbers?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct. And
So-
I was hoping to have one of our auctioneers. He's actually our nationally awarded best auctioneer in the country. He was supposed to be on with us, but he couldn't make it today, unfortunately. But yes, I call it shouty day.
And
because they get out and shout.
are buyers agents shouting on behalf of their clients? Like they're there physically with their buyer clients shouting these numbers?
So the strange thing about the Australian, or the biggest difference between the Australian market and yours is that we have not many buyer agents. So in Australia, the agent actually represents buyer and seller on both sides.
That's like
Right.
Iceland.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
It's
they
also
do
what
the-
we used to have here, and then they sort of said, well, maybe there's some conflict in that, but that was the first thing. So then it evolved from that to just an online version of the same thing effectively.
Yeah, so when COVID first came in, so all the auctioneers were all freaking out because they're like, what do you mean we don't get to stand out front of the house and shout at people? I'm like, what? Why? How? So then they put it through Zoom. So basically they would have, like we've got a gallery today of us, they would have a gallery of buyers and they would be on Zoom and they would be conducting a physical auction just remotely. Which took them a little bit of getting used to because they were shouting at a screen, not at. And I mean, look, auctioning's not shouting. Some of it is, but it is actually a really, really, really hard craft to learn. You've got to entertain. You've got to control speed and momentum and know who to push and know who to nurture and things like that. So it is a hell of a craft in itself. I personally won't auctioneer. I leave that to people that know what they're doing with it.
A question. So if you are only representing the seller, for example, and you're just, doing the paperwork for the buyer, how do you know if the buyer can afford the property?
Yeah, so we call it pre-qualifying. So essentially, I know you guys refer to it as probably proof of funds, or they have a letter from the lender and things like that. So we have a pre-approval process with our banks and lenders here as well. So essentially we will pre-qualify the buyers and ask them what pre-approval they have, which lender it's with, what deposit they've got, those sort of things. So it is hard, it is probably difficult where I consider that part of my job to protect my seller client, because we want the contract to actually go through, because that's kind of our job. But we have to ask a series of questions that your buyer agent would normally have as part of their buyer consultation. We actually have a mini buyer consultation with each of the people that are interested in the property to check, to basically, I say, grade the caliber of each of those buyers of the likelihood of success for the contract going through.
So when we are listing properties, right, we're staging, professional photography, like, are you guys doing that too?
100%, yeah.
And
So not all properties need staging. So it depends what the property is as to what preparation we need to do. Sometimes it's just a tweak of how they've got the property furnished to maximise the presentation of the home for buyers. But yeah, if it requires staging, it's professional photography, copywriting, video, absolutely everything that a listing agent in your market would do. We do that for our listings. And then we're also negotiating with all of the buyers ourselves as well.
But then, so do you also show all the buyers the home yourself?
We do.
Is that in one day?
Sorry?
Is that like just one day of showings or?
It depends on the campaign. So if it's a street auction, so if you're doing an online like an auction campaign, normally you would allow, traditionally that was a 4-week campaign, because there's no contingencies allowed on auction day. So they have to have done everything prior to Shouty Day. When we're talking private treaty or the online offer systems, then it's led by how many people are interested, how many people are wanting to go through the property, and when the offer process actually begins. So just to give you an idea at the moment, from launching to the portals, or what you would have the MLS, from launching through to the portals to contracts signed in our what I call bread and butter market. So your newer homes, stock standard in the newer states, we're looking at around about a 10 to 12 day turnaround.
So just if I'm understanding you correctly, on the street auctions, you allow a 4-week window and all buyers kind of have to do any due diligence up front. And then on that day,
Correct.
4 weeks in the future, they show up there and yell and have already completed presumably home inspections and anything like that?
Correct.
So you might have,
Correct.
say, 7 or 8 people that have already done home inspections?
Correct. Yeah. So bank
You're blowing my mind
valuations,
here.
home inspection. Come on down.
Well, what's really striking me is the lack of agency that buyers seem to have down there. That it's not that one system is better or worse or anything, but here we do have strong representation for our buyers, and it would be unusual for one not to be represented in a competing offer situation. And I think that brings a lot of value to our market and to our buyers here locally. But yeah, it all sounds strange, but I can see how it would work. Yeah.
Look, we are seeing a rise in buyer agents, or what they're called buyer advocates. The same as we have vendor advocates or seller advocates over here. I keep saying vendor because to us a seller is a vendor, but a vendor to you, I believe, is a provider or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
Interchangeable.
Okay, cool. I just didn't want it to not translate properly over to people going, what are you talking about? So we are seeing a rise of buyer agents coming into play, and it's probably because people are pretty time poor, but also too, they're getting to a level of frustration of continually missing out. The hardest part is that, so just to give you a story of the buyer agency situation here, they're actually not, because our system doesn't work, isn't oiled for it, they can actually get in the way at the moment, as opposed to professionals working with professionals. Does that make sense? So it sort of it can complicate things a little bit, but at the same time, we all have to learn that, you know, this is how it's possibly going. I'm not 100%.
I've always found other agents just complicate things.
And that's a sound bite for you to put out your
Less is more.
Go for it.
Less is more.
So what about when the market shifts? I mean, here in Nova Scotia, it seems to be on about an 8-year trend that, you know, a high is always followed by a low. And we came off of a 10 or 12-year high, and we went into a 4-year low, and now we're back into a high, but this will end as well. So what happens when you're in a slower market? What happens if nobody shows up? What happens if there's only one buyer? Does that depress the prices and drive them down, or?
Look, I mean, basic economics, isn't it? Supply and demand. So if I'm saying a tectonic plate at the moment, where we're sort of starting to see a little bit of an undercurrent. They came out on the news this morning and basically said that the banks are expecting at least 4, potentially 5 incremental rate rises from May or probably June through to the end of the year. So that in itself, once the media get hold of all of that information, obviously self-fulfilling prophecy, and buyers start pulling back, and then oddly it happens, the market changes. So we're on that cusp right now. We've actually got 2 elections this year. So we've got our federal one in May, and then we've got our state one here in Victoria in November, which is normally our spring and normally our big selling season. So it's going to be a little bit of a stop-start kind of year. What you find there, so at an auction, if it's an on the street auction, they pass it in. If they pass in on a live bid, then that live bid has the rights to negotiate first with the owner directly still under auction conditions, because anything that happens negotiation wise 3 days either side of an auction date is under auction conditions, so no contingencies. So no cooling off, no inspections, no anything, that all has to have been done. If it then just reverts to a private sale. So over here, the on-street auction is just part of the process. It's a method. It doesn't have to sell on auction day. Obviously, they like it to because it's nice and clean and it's all done, but it's just part of the process.
So a question, when you are doing an auction, how is the price set for the home?
So essentially what happens in our state, we have what's called a statement of information, which is the comps of where and justifying how we've priced the property. End of the day, the vendor will decide what they will accept, but we have to comp it out and say this is what it is. But essentially, the auctioneer will call for an opening bid. So it's up to the buyers, the market, to determine where that starts.
So, but so it's not an offers over system. It's just kind of opening bid.
Correct.
But you said they have to take the highest bid. What if someone just bids something there that the seller's not happy with?
There's a reserve. There is a reserve
Okay.
that's set by the vendor prior to, like on auction day. So and it should be, in the perfect world, it should be based on the buyer feedback that they've had throughout the campaign, what the comps are, all those sort of things. But the reserve can shift during that auction process as well, because if the auctioneer comes back and says, look, we've got 3 there that aren't going to start bidding until we declare that we are on the market, which means we've met reserve. It's a gamble and it's a leap of faith, and it's a trust thing between agent, auctioneer and seller, that they can get the momentum going. Because at that point, if the auctioneer declares we are on the market, we're now playing for the keys. And at that point, the property will be sold to the person that holds the highest bid.
Man, this is so crazy. And,
I know, you're freaking out.
Yeah.
You're freaking out.
I mean, just the weather alone would not permit doing this here. I can't imagine you wouldn't sell anything in the winter.
Melbourne is not the sunshine capital of Australia, I can tell you right now, but we hold them indoors if we need to.
Right.
So we'll have them inside the house, ideally on the street, because you want that theatre and you want the performance, but you can actually have very intimate auctions that are in a lounge room with the right amount of people. Or over here, we have a lot of outdoor entertaining areas that are all covered because it's Melbourne and it rains a lot. So they'll have them in pergolas or the alfresco areas and things like that. Auctions, no matter what the weather, it's rain, hail, shine, auction day. If it's an auction campaign and it's today's the day, it will happen. Is there minimum incremental increase in the bidding? That can be up to the auctioneer. So essentially, Andy, who was going to be on with us, he's actually taken $1 increments at the pointy end of a sale, because it can start something else, if that makes sense. So a lot of it comes down to the agent's role with regards to the buyers, preparing them for an auction, a live auction, is discussing strategy, discussing market conditions, pricing, all those sort of things. So there's a couple of ways that you can educate a buyer. And one of the things I do with my online offer platform is talking to the buyers and saying, look, basically you've got 2 choices. And it's exactly the same as if you were on the street auctioning. You either put in a placeholder to get things started and then sit back and watch and see how the momentum goes, or you go in strong and try and psych out some of the other people that would like to build it up, because that can build it up as a frenzy, and then you end up probably going a little bit higher than what you wanted to. Or if you basically go strong and say, look, I'm prepared to pay $600,000 for that property, put that in, and it'll psych out the people that have only got $550, for instance, and stop that momentum. So there's different ways to approach it, and it will depend on how many people that they've seen at the other open for inspections, as to how threatened they feel or how competitive they feel the property is going to get under the auction all the multi-offer conditions.
So how does
Everyone-
how does the contract work? Have they actually signed the purchase and sale contract before bidding, or
No.
so they have to sign it afterwards? Have buyers ever backed out and refused to sign the contract?
One in a gazillion, basically. Generally speaking, if an auctioneer, if someone turns up, like on the street, for instance, if someone turns up that none of the agents recognise, so normally there'll be the listing agent plus a support team of their agents from the office to manage the people in the crowd, and other agents in the office will have brought their buyers with them and things like that. If a random turns up and no one knows who they are, an agent will very quickly scurry over and ask them some questions. So we have had properties sold to people that have never inspected the property during the campaign. A car has pulled up in the street while the auction is happening, and they have successfully purchased the property.
Wow. So I know Ozda's in Iceland, so our one of our Tom Ferry gals. So she's paid 3%.
Yeah.
That's what their fee is. Again, no buyer agent. Would that be the same down your way?
Yeah, so we range between sort of in scarily enough, in the inner city where the prices are substantially higher and things, you can be looking at sort of 1.5%. And that's for both sides. In the growth area where I am, we sort of sit around the 2.2%. Yeah, as your standard.
The auctioneer is taking a cut as well.
They're paid on top.
Yes.
So the auctioneer here is a fixed appearance fee, or a booking fee, because if you sell the property prior to the auction, they will still get paid because you have taken the seat on the plane, so to speak, and they haven't been able to book something else in for that time slot.
So you can take an offer before auction day. This is what we call maybe a preemptive offer here, or
100%, yeah. So obviously it provides a really strong position though for the seller and for the agent, because at that point it want to be a damn good offer to stop an auction, and it needs to be under auction conditions. So it has to be no contingencies, everything would have to be done, because you don't stop a campaign for a maybe.
yeah.
So what would be the average over asking right now in where you are, like when you're doing an auction?
Yeah, well, because we don't have an asking as such, so we don't go on at a fixed price. So we're going, sorry, my messages are going crazy, it's the morning. We basically normally advertise between a range, or it'll have a price guide. So we're allowed to do a 10% range. So if we believe the comps put the property, crikey, can you believe that all those dings were all one person sending multiple
Text? Oh. Hi.
Sorry
enter.
Yeah, so like for instance, we've had properties. I had a property the other week. It was on for 560 to 600, and that sold 650.
Maybe a better way of comparing it, how quickly are your prices rising year over year there?
In regards to what the cycle, the
Well,
time of
no,
the
I
cycle?
mean, like right now here in Halifax, our prices are fairly extreme. They're going up 25 to 30% a year. So a house that sold last year for 500 is selling this year for 650 or more. How quickly are prices climbing there locally?
We're not going as dramatic as that. So our growth year on year has been only about 12.5, between 12.5 and 15%. So yeah, that's massive.
We are a standout. I think Canada and most G20 countries, I think, are in that 12 to 15% range.
Yeah.
Historically, we have been undervalued, and I think we're seen as an adjustment to market averages.
So you'd be having a field day.
Not really. Not really.
We have to represent those buyers, Joe. We got to represent the buyers here.
So are you all predominantly listing or buying? What's your
both?
Both. Okay.
We represent our clients individually.
Yeah.
So we sign agency contracts with the person, and that person might be
Yeah.
a buyer or they might be a seller. And so we're doing both at this for different clients, but we're doing both at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in the wars.
I've got a question for you. I mean, I don't mean this disrespectfully, like that auction system seems slightly archaic, where everything is moving towards technology and all these things.
Yeah,
but it sounds
100%.
like there's an element of that going on too. And recently this news release came out, and there's no details, but this couldn't be better timing because this came out yesterday across Newswire saying that our national governing body, which is the Canadian Real Estate Association, is rolling out a pilot program where they're going to test this idea that through the MLS system, there'll be more transparency with respect to bidding and entering and registering and tracking offers. Very new. The news release came out yesterday with no details, how, when, what. But the immediate reaction was two things. One, well, there goes the art of negotiation. And two, why do you need buyer's agents? And then three, just a bunch of questions that some of which we've covered here, which is, does it also disclose conditions? But are you seeing, it sounds like there's an increased online bidding system. Do you think that's going to take over the old street auctions? And two, can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more, how that actually works?
Yeah, sure. So interestingly, and I'll just go back to what you're talking about with the announcement, because interestingly enough, there's an undercurrent here in Victoria that the government are working on with regards to having all auctions having the reserve public from the start of the campaign. So again, that transparency sort of angle, and also that private treaty must have a fixed price, not a range. So I think a lot of governments, and I think a lot of governments around the world, because of the way things are going, are all trying to find a way that fixes the housing market.
Well, what's a private treaty?
Private sale. So just a normal, private treaty allows for contingencies and is not an auction. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
normal MLS sale with no competing offers.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So they're the ones that I do the most, and they're the ones that I do through the online offer platform that I use, which is called Market Buy. So there's several around, but I've found Market Buy to be the most flexible and the most user friendly, if that makes sense. So basically, what happens? We put a property onto the portals or on the MLS, and buyers come through, have a look at it. They then say, "Yep, we really like it. We'd like to put an offer in." Fantastic. They get a link through to the portal, and they can then submit their offer from that in that point. Through there, they can select what their contingencies are, whether they've got a finance clause, whether they're doing home inspections, those sort of things, and what settlement period they would be proposing for the property. The best part about it is, sorry?
So the buyers are really representing themselves. What about a first-time buyer that's never done this before?
Yep, they're in there too. But they've got us on speed dial as well.
Wild.
Yeah, Wild West.
Wild West. Well, Joe, I really want to thank you. Like, this is just, again, perfect timing. And thank you, Chandler, for sending off that article. But anyway, hopefully we can catch up again and, see what's going to happen here, because it's different times for sure. You guys had any last things?
No, I was just going to say, so when did this announcement happen for you guys? Just yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be a pilot, and there's no details, so.
But
no
how do
one
they
knows.
Who's the lucky people that get to pilot that? Like, who's the lucky seller or the lucky agent? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does that even?
Hey, Chandler, let's go. We're always causing trouble. Let's do it.
Heck yeah, let's go. I love it.
Let's pioneer that. Yeah, and look, if they do the same thing here.
Yeah. I did auction one of my clients owns an auction house here, and I did do a cottage there probably about 4 years ago. And but nowhere, not like what you guys are doing for sure. That's wild.
I mean, Look, it's one of those things where it's been the norm, so to speak. So if that's just the way things have been done, no one sort of questions it. But COVID, if anything good had to come out of COVID, it was evolving and adapting and improving how we actually transact property, how we do a lot of things in life. And really at this point, it now becomes, how do we maximize our role? Because I know, Chandler, you were saying you were sort of like, okay, well, if all of this comes in, what is the role of the agent? What is negotiation? What of that? Because we paid good money to market and negotiate. That's what we do. The thing is, don't fear it, because what I found was, by going into the online and having the offer platform and things that I've got, you just evolve, you just change where you fit in, and there is a whole other skill set that you can really grow another set of muscles on and embrace. And when it happens, reach out again, because I've been having so much fun in working out how we fit in and where we actually maximize why our clients choose us. Because the quickest one to adapt to it grows the biggest set of muscles on it, and your clients are still in good hands, and you do have a place, 100%.
Here we go. We're opening our own brokerage.
And the reality too for us, when these sudden announcements come out with no details, often the fear and uncertainty have a greater impact than the reality of what actually gets implemented. Yeah.
And it's those magical sound bites that they put out there, and everyone goes, what now? But until the detail comes out, you don't know what you're working with and within. So like you said, if it's a pilot, it'll be interesting to see who puts their hand up to pilot that first ship.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for, and I know it's early morning there, so I'm totally appreciating your time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Absolute pleasure. Take care. Good luck with it.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.